Before we get into the meat of our show today, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I think I particularly because of my relationship with Jim Donovan and what he's meant to me in my career, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk briefly about his situation. I'm sure by now most of Cleveland sports fans have heard that Jimmy is, I don't want to say he's battling his cancer again, because I'll be perfectly honest, I think Jimmy has been battling this since his original diagnosis decades ago. He has done it in a very stealth-like way. He does not like attention. He doesn't talk about himself. He feels uncomfortable talking about himself. And I think Jimmy, for the most part, has been ongoing with his treatments. But recently, he's learned that he's back in the throes of the fight of leukemia. He's been getting regular chemotherapy treatments. And he woke up 2 days ago and realized that his hair was falling out because of the chemotherapy. And rather than, as valiant as it's been for him to try to hide it and just to try to manage this himself, he realized he wasn't going to be able to do that. He wanted to get ahead of it. He shaved his head. He came in. The staff was informed. He told all the viewers and Cleveland on the 7 o'clock show a couple of nights ago of his situation. Jimmy is, and I'm not saying this now because he's sick again, I have said this throughout the time I've known Jim Donovan, both as a person and as a sportscaster. Jimmy is quite simply the best local sportscaster I have ever seen. I've worked in some major markets. I worked 17 years at ESPN. What Jimmy does is mind-boggling. And the way he does it, you'll know this because you've been a sports anchor before, McNuggets. Typically, sportscasters write out everything they're going to say.
He doesn't write anything, right?
He's never used a script. He will sit down in his chair, and he will know what his elements are. I've got 3.5 minutes to navigate Guardians highlights, a scoreboard, a soundbite, maybe a Cavs highlight, a scoreboard, a highlight, and then a few other items. And the reason it's written is because you've got a strict 3 minutes, 3:30, whatever it is. You have to hit that time, particularly because Jimmy's the last element in the show. After the sportscast, goodbye, evening news is next. Mm-hmm. So producers and directors love that all that is perfectly scripted out to the word because you can time how long the show's going to be. Jimmy's never done that.
You told me that the first time I met you when we spoke about Jim Donovan, and I was like, there's no way.
Have you seen it in the studio?
Yeah.
Have you ever been up there to watch him in the studio while he does it?
Yeah, I've been in the control room too, and they have gotten, I guess, have learned over the years.
They know his cadence.
To follow him, but the first time I was in there, I was like, if I was a director, if I was Director Steve, I'd be like, no way. Like, no way.
So I've done that at a few stations that I worked at. I had a director in Columbus and Tampa that were tremendous. And they understood that I liked to ad-lib and I liked to freelance. But to be perfectly honest with you, my going that route was because I found out Jim did it. Mm-hmm. When I was, and I've talked about this on the show, I've told Jimmy this, I still have the VHS tapes. When I was a freshman at Bowling Green, and all through my time at Bowling Green, when Jim Donovan was here, just starting as the sports director at Channel 3, my parents would set up the VCR so it would record for 15 minutes from 6:15 to 6:30 and 11:15 to 11:30 every Monday through Friday. When the tape got full, they would drop it in the mail and send it to me, and I would watch back all of Jim Donovan's sportscasts because even as a young 18-year-old who knew he wanted to do this for a living, I knew there was something special about this guy. I didn't know what. I just loved his passion, his energy, his spontaneity. It wasn't until later I learned that none of that was scripted. It's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen in this business. Now, we freelance this show, obviously. You're not going to write a 2-hour show. Everything we do here is unscripted. But I can honestly say, of all of the things that I've been able to accomplish in my career, it's even though Jimmy didn't know me until much later, my first day on Cold Pizza, Jim Donovan was a guest.
Oh, really?
Because my first day when we launched Cold Pizza, October 20, 2003, LeBron James was making his NBA debut, the same time I was debuting at ESPN. And we needed a Cleveland guest to talk about LeBron's first game in Sacramento. And they came to me, knowing I'm the Cleveland guy, and they go, who you got? And I said, this is easy, Jim Donovan. And he didn't even know that, well, I take that back. We watched the 97 Rose Bowl, Ohio State and Arizona State, on the sidelines together. I followed him around like a puppy dog. It was the first time I'd ever met him. I introduced myself to him and I said, I hope you don't mind, but I'm like, a young Major League Baseball player getting to pick the brain of Mickey Mantle. That's the way I viewed it. So, and he was gracious. He answered all my questions. And years later, after I started at ESPN, I had him on as a guest. And I knew he was doing the 11 o'clock sportscast the night before. And we were on the air at 7 a.m., which means he had to be back here at the studio to do a satellite hit for the show which was anchored in New York. And he said, yeah, no problem, I'll do it. He graciously came in, he did it. That's when our relationship really began, although we met at the Rose Bowl. And Jimmy didn't know it, but once I found out that he ad-libbed everything, I thought, he's the best I've ever seen. For me to be that good, I've got to learn how to do that. And I taught myself, just as he did, to do sportscasts without writing scripts. And it was absolutely, he was the impetus for that. I think as I did that and mastered that, it was crazy how my career took off. Because I learned, I'm not reading now like everybody else. Now I'm telling stories. I'm a storyteller.
And when you do that, it feels like you're talking to the audience. And as an audience member watching, it feels like Jim Donovan's talking to me or
That's
to you
exactly
or to
it.
anybody. And when you go unscripted as opposed to reading, even the best people and the main sports center anchors, they read scripts and
they read them word for word.
There's a teleprompter, you read every script word for word. They ad-lib a little bit, but for
Chris
the most part,
Fowler is another one that just
completely ad-libs.
Wings everything.
But what would you say, 98 out of 100, 99
out of 100 read every word they're talking.
And they write every word, or a
Everything.
producer writes it.
Yep.
And when you
That's
do go
crazy.
ad-lib, and that's what, I've been here for a year in Cleveland, a little over a year, and I watched Jim pretty freak. I've only met him twice in passing.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been nicer in our little mini interactions, but the ability to do that brings the viewer into the studio and brings Jim
That's a good way of
Donovan
saying it,
into the
Mike.
living room, and they have that interpersonal connection. And even though he's speaking to a million people through the TV,
Right.
it feels like a one-on-one connection, and that's what makes, in my opinion, him special. And when we first talked, you said he's the best to ever do it.
I've told you that.
What you just repeated, you told me the very first time we
I've
met.
maintained that honestly since the late 80s.
And now knowing him and watching him for a year, I don't disagree at all.
Yeah.
I think the most impressive part about it is sometimes, like you talk about state-run media all the time. Like when you are the voice of a football team, you're the voice on the air, and people know you, and you do the news locally. You are pretty much I would say, the representation most times of the organization.
Right.
The executives aren't going to meet, and you are the person that is the voice of the Browns. So I found it always very refreshing that when he does his hits after the games and when the Browns are bad, he says it. And he says it with a level of candor that a lot of people can't do or get off, right? Like
He's authentic, that's why.
He gives that energy after the game, and I've heard him say, like, the Browns, this was a disappointing season, and they just didn't have it. This thing looks ugly. And I could respect somebody that's the voice and the face of an organization being able to keep it real to a point where they're saying, listen, this is what it is. I represent the team, but I want the team to be better. And I've always respected him for that.
So that's another skill set that very few play-by-play men, because he's really 2 in 1. He's the best local studio sports anchor I've ever seen. He also happens to be the best radio play-by-play guy I've ever listened to. I've listened to all of them.
In the NFL or just in
the
sports
NFL,
in general?
In the NFL. Now, here's the thing about what you just touched on. There is the unwritten rule when you're state-sponsored media that you're not going to be too critical of the team. You're an employee of the team. You're one of us. There are guys, Michael Kay in New York with the Yankees is a guy that if they suck, he's going to say they suck. And if they want to fire him for it,
He'll
he's
fall
fine
on the
with
sword
that.
and he'll go, yeah.
But there's very few local guys, radio guys, that feel, now Michael Kay is a TV play-by-play guy, but there's very few local guys paid by the teams that have the skill set to throw darts at the team when they deserve it, but do it in a way where the team officials can't even be mad because he's telling the truth.
Right.
Jim never lets his emotions get the best of him. We have our Monday chats every Monday, and I'll say, oh, my God, this, that, and the other. Jim always puts it into perspective. This was a bad matchup from jump.
Yeah.
we're gonna beat teams that are better than the team we just lost to, but this was a bad matchup, and he tells you why. So when Jim does his on-field recap immediately after every game that goes on to Channel 3's digital site and does tens of thousands of hits every Monday.
I watch it every Monday.
Everybody does. It's mandatory appointment watching on Monday. Jim tells it the way it is. That's why he's as popular as he is. He's always fair. He always gives it to the fan straight. If the team was bad, Jimmy doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't hide it. He says they were bad. If they're good, he doesn't overhype it and say they're going to win the Super Bowl now. He just says the way he sees it in that moment. So he's accomplished so much in his career. Early in his career, when he first started here, this station was actually owned by NBC. It was an owned and operated affiliate. Jim used to do national NFL games for NBC. So he would have an assignment every Sunday. Oftentimes it was the Browns because he knew the team so well. But imagine that tricky spot. The national voice of a game between the Browns and it oftentimes wasn't the Browns and the Bengals because those games were going to their number one crew, which was usually, I think, Cricky and
Dick Enberg,
Trumpy.
Yeah.
Those guys used to do the big games, but Jim would sometimes he'd get like a Cleveland, San Francisco game or whatever. And he always managed it just fine. No one in San Francisco would know that this guy was the local guy for Cleveland because he was fair. And he also did Olympic assignments for NBC. So he's done so much in his career. It's incredible. And I don't even like talking about it like he's done because he's not. I know Jim's not.
It hasn't stopped him before.
It hasn't stopped him before. It will not stop him this time. He will work through this as much as he possibly can. The hope is he'll go through this round of treatments and he'll be back as strong as ever. Jimmy has been here at WKYC for 38 years.
Absurd.
I mean, I don't know this. I feel a little odd saying this, but I don't think there's a broadcaster, forget sportscaster. I don't know that there is a broadcaster in the business today that can say that they've been at the same station for the last 38 years. He's been loyal to this city and to this station. He's meant a lot to our area. Jimmy, we love you. We're behind you. And I know that in a very short period of time, we're going to see Jimmy doing it just as energetically and as passionately as he always has. He's definitely going to beat this thing and move on forward from it. So, again, Jimmy, get well. I know he's going to work some through this, and we'll be seeing him. But I know he's going to have this beat in no time. And he's got a whole lot of people behind him. It's been great for me to watch just through social how much support he's getting from the viewers. I think he's the most popular broadcaster that this city currently has. And I think you'd be really hard-pressed to say he's not the most popular broadcaster this city has ever known.